Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to Occult Explorers. I'm Snappy, and I'm joined by my co-host and good friend, Dion. How you doing, Dion?
Cheers.
Life is good, is it not?
Mhm.
So today we're here for kind of a weird episode. We're going to be talking about cranial mysteries. But before we get into that, I just want to take a second to remind everyone, this show is a couple friends hanging out, telling stories about weird, crazy occult stuff that they read. We're not passing judgment. We're trying to be as non-biased as possible, and everything stated is just our opinion, you know? So take it as you will and use your own reason here and make up your own mind about everything that is said. Okay? Also, trigger warning. We're going to be getting into the ultra violence, the sex and gore. Are we not, Dion?
Yeah, I mean, that's almost every episode. Or if you're going to get into ancient mythology or the Bible, that's what it's about, isn't it?
That's a very good point. It's very true, but we still want to give the warnings to everyone out there. In this episode, though, Talking Heads, we're going to get into some beheadings. We're going to be getting into some weirdness, physical deformities, aliens, crazy amounts of sex. And in the last half, after your presentation, our good friend Dr. Aman is going to join us as well. So it's sure to be an incredible discussion. So start us off, Dion. What are you talking about when we're getting into these cranial mysteries? Where do you want to go?
Right. Well, I thought of the Misfits, the punk band, the Misfits. You've heard of?
Right. Oh my God, that song, "I Want Your Skulls," right?
Oh yeah, during the week, I put it on, and it's like a teenage love song, teenage angst. But he has to collect the girls' skulls and put them on the wall.
Yeah.
People are fascinated with the human skull. Since the beginning of time, it's the symbol, the iconography of it, what it stands for. So let's hit the first pick, because we did an episode before about California, about some California mysteries, and on Catalina Island there's a skull museum.
Right.
And the Hollywood stars and celebrities would come over to Catalina and take the boat over and play with Native American skulls, desecrate them. Because there's that aspect of it. That's part of the trigger warning, is that we recognize that digging up people's graves, people's ancestors, and turning it into art, or even in a museum, for whatever reason, there is a form of desecration to others. But to some people, it is science. We learn from it. We evolve from it. So there's both aspects. Just putting that out there,
Something like archaeology definitely is mixed, right? It does provide us with incredible value, especially when we're going into the ancient past. But when you're dealing with a lot of lived cultures, especially cultures that are still persistent and connected to the land, like you said, it gets weird. And we have to honor, we're talking about the mortal remains of human beings, right? This is kind of the most sacred thing in one sense, right?
The ancestors. That's one thing it does represent, is our ancestors, a connection to our ancestors. I remember when I went to Peru, they were explaining part of they would have the mummies, and they'd put crystals on them and gold. And I remember one of the research team asked him, like, why do they do that? And the guide said, well, literally, it's like a radio. We're trying to communicate with your ancestors and dial them in. And I thought about it, and those are the same components in a radio: quartz crystals and gold, and pieces of metal and what have you. And
that's interesting. And you're right, though. We see all of this stuff so often with the ancestor worship and the remains of the body. In some of these Bronze Age societies, they would be burying the bodies inside the home or in the garden next to the home in order to have them close with you. They used to have wakes where the bodies were brought into the homes, right? And they'd be housed there until they were buried. And then, or if they're cremated, they were put right there in your living room, right where everyone would sit and gather to be a continued member of the family. There's this deep connection here. And it's important we recognize, too, that ancestor worship, along with mother goddess worship. These are the oldest forms of religion we have, right? Like the cult of the skull. There's all of this really ancient connection to these bones. And there's always this association with foretelling the future, with this speaking to the dead and having them recall or give advice or foretell something that's going to happen. But they become a totem, an ancestral presence from beyond the grave that can commune with the present. And it's through that connection of the physical body that this is possible, right? We even see this with saints. We see this with many different cultures too, right? With different forms of monks being treated this way, where the bodies of these magical people become totem or totemic and invoke the spirits or invoke a spirit, right?
Oh, we'll cover all that today. We have examples of all that, luckily. So part of the Krāníon, our cranial mysteries, is the fascination with the skull itself, what the human mind, our brain, can do, also elongated skulls in terms of natural and artificial, cutting off of heads, how that's used symbolically and in mythology. And we're even going to have a part 2 because there's so much that we're going to go into. So let's hit the next pick, and we're going into your neck of the woods here. All right. Yeah, so first, you're going to have to break this down because you're going to break down Kali and, all right, these are necklaces. I want you all to look at the necklaces. On the left on Shiva and the right on Kali. A necklace of skulls. And they have symbolic meanings. And I know the one on the left is for Pavarti. You know, I was looking that up and I was like, whoa, it's a wild story where she sees him and goes, what are those skulls on your neck? And he says, those are you. Those are your previous incarnations. And you had to die that many times to become who you are right now in front of me.
100%, right? Shiva is kind of this manifestation of the divine masculine, that yogi, that shaman, the one who reassembles creation and returns back to the one, who breaks free, and teaches how to do so through example. And he wears, right, the past lives. He's also that divine representation of time. And like these two images, right, you often see them in kind of like a triplicate. You have Shiva, the undisturbed yogi, right, who's in that state of deep relaxation. And then the union of him with the divine feminine Shakti that becomes the Adrinahari Ishvara, or the Shiva Nataraj, the cosmic dancer who gives birth to creation through their vibratory music that they create, And then you have the destructive essence of this coming forward in the end, right, with Kali as this destroying force of time that breaks everything down in this cycle of death and recreation, and this losing of the head imagery is so essential all across this kind of Shakti type worship. I think of stories of Ramakrishna where he was said to have attempted decapitation and the goddess intervened, and that's how he achieved his form of enlightenment. But he was willing and in preparation to offer up his entirety, killing his body, in order to achieve that transcendence. So this image of the skull and the loss of the skull, it's representative of that divine aspect of time, of the cycles of death and rebirth, in order to manifest and become that Shiva, that recreated cosmic being at the beginning, right? That oneness, that Brahman. It's beautiful stuff.
I knew you could break it down. Love it. And so we'll see these elements in Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity. Go to the next pick. The beads. Those necklaces become bracelets and beads. Rosary beads, and Buddhists have them. And they're representative of life and birth. Regeneration.
Yeah. And the counting, right? In order to count out time, using these mullas, right? The jap malla in the Indian traditions, and these are often of sacred seeds, right? You would see them as like either the poly seed, or sometimes you see them as, where is it? I have a whole bunch of them. The Rudraksha bead, which is a type of tree that's a fruit that's like sacred to Shiva, that's dried and turned into these mallas that that a lot of the monastics, like the sadhus, and a lot of even the lay people wear as a way to count their prayers of their mantras or their meditations that they're saying, that they use to connect to that divinity outside of time, right? That cosmic unity. It's profoundly deep stuff, and like I said, I'm only presenting a very general idea from a singular perspective. You know, these Indian traditions go deep, and there's so much there. Like, and I'm in by no way an expert, so.
And today I'm compressing a lot of stuff, so we're just going really quick over it, because we could do an hour-long episode on each one of these topics. So we're talking about skulls. Let's talk about what's inside the skull. Something important inside the brain. Go to the next pick. Pineal gland. I want to break down a ritual and get into some form of other dark rituals. The pineal gland contains DMT, and there's lots of myth talking about people extracting the pineal gland from a human being and eating it to get high as a form of DMT. We've talked about getting DMT from plants, extracting DMT, this and from getting through the urine, all these different ways. Well, there's people that propose that you get it through the pineal gland, and there's evidence of we could say surgeries where they're knocking holes in skulls. People, and now we're getting into the wild world of, say, adrenochrome style stuff.
It's like craziness, this stuff.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah. But
I've also heard people describe like the pineal gland as the eye of Horus.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of yogic rituals that are designed to sort of stimulate that region, the third eye, to help release this amrit that you taste at the back of your throat that leads you into these kind of mystical experiences. You know?
Yeah. Well, someone would say, and people, it could be quite true, because the calcification and just the reality of it, that there's maybe not enough DMT in some pineals for a person to get high. But if you've watched any of our past episodes, you can easily change that through priming a human being. Through biotransformation, you would give them 5-HTP, extra melatonin, certain herbs, and you would beef that up, as well as an MAOI that the person would be taking. So if I was going to knock open someone's skull to eat some pineal glands, I might take a inhibitor, the MAOI. There's more to the story there, when we're talking about that. And like I said, melatonin help increases DMT production in the body. There's different things. And so people wanted, not just for cannibalism or just for headhunting or to control people's souls or to commune with ancestors, people thought if they can get to the ingredients inside the skull, you can get high and get spiritual powers.
Wild.
This is part of ancient dark rites. They do everything with the body. You're seeing that. If we're looking at hieroglyphics and we're just looking at the past, it gets dirty. That's just the truth of it. So next I want to talk about a little something, and we're going fast. Crystal skulls. You might have heard of these crystal skulls. You might have seen the Temple of the Crystal Skull. I've seen that one in person years ago, probably like 20-something years ago, 20, 30 years ago. Played music for it. Was hired to play music with a couple of my buddies, and I even asked the owner. It was a sweet old lady named Anna Mitchell Hedges. What kind of music does it like? What do I do? Is there any rules to it? And she was just this sweet old lady from the South, and she had a little accent, said, "No, honey, the skull, you can do whatever for the skull." And and these rich people got around it, meditated. Me and my homies played the didgeridoos and little temple bowls, and they had their time. And I didn't know much about it because there wasn't a lot of literature then. And so over the course of the years, they become famous. And then there's the Temple of the Crystal Skull movie, and I'm like, what? But it turns out a lot of them are fakes. Where do they come from? They're supposed to come from Yucatan, from the Mayan regions, down there in Central America. Like, let's hit the next pick. Here's a Mayan with an elongated skull, because we're going to be talking about that afterwards. Just prepping you for that, because that's also going to be in the next episode. Because we're not even getting into the Choctaw, Chippewa, Chinook, the Sioux, the Pueblan, the Aztec, the Mayan, the Olmec head binding, elongated skulls. That's for the next episode with the other stuff. I just wanted to throw a little bit in there just to show you, because that's where they thought it would come from. But these crystal skulls, they come from Germany. Go to the next pic. That's where they come from. Idar Oberstein. It's a little town in Germany. That's where the crystal skulls come from. They found out. And the whole story starts with in like 1860, a guy named Eugene Bourbon. Napoleon sends him to Mexico to collect Mayan artifacts. And then a few years later, he becomes the architect to the court of Maximilian I. You remember we talked about that, how the Habsburgs sent one of their princes down there to become the emperor of Mexico, just for a couple of years before they killed him.
Wild.
He didn't even speak Spanish. And part of that, he had a court archaeologist, Eugene Bourbon, and it deals with this town of Oberstein in Germany, and it's a special little town. This was the capital, gemstone capital of the world at one point. Cutting, agates, quartz, Kabbalistic jewelers were making jewelry that was occult oriented. Very famous in this little town here. And they tracked down to this is where the crystal skulls come from. And they were they're made here but sold outside and represented as being Mayan artifacts. Well, because there's more to the story. And even in the late 1800s, they sent an expedition, about 200 of them, to all around the world looking for more gemstones. And a lot of it was in South America, where you got Paraguay, Uruguay. Like Venezuela means Little Venice. Kaiser Wilhelm founded it. They were, like people talk about Germans in Argentina. They were there in the 1800s. It was much earlier. It was 100 years earlier than they think the Nazi game started. They were there for other reasons. They were already setting up shop and naming the countries, and there was an expedition coming from Oberstein. Yeah, go to the next pic. I'll show you. So that's that church that's carved into the side of this mountain. And the story is based on a prince who kills his brother, obviously. So they have to build a church to reconcile. And go to the next pic. And there's a tunnel system. That's how you get to that church.
Oh, cool.
This is where the crystal skulls come from. The quartz crystals from Brazil.
Interesting.
They brought it from Brazil, brought it back here, carved it, and then it went out to the rest of the world as a Mayan artifact. Your magic crystal skulls that everyone knows about. And there's even more. The Deutsche Edelsteinkönigin. That means the German rare stone queen. They even have a queen. They crown a queen there once a year with these rare gemstones. And that's what it means, the rare stone. Gemstone.
Interesting.
Yeah. So talismanic magic, Kabbalistic stuff, gemstones, cultism. The little city here has a rich history dealing with those skulls. This is where they track down the skulls to.
Wild.
And those crystal skulls were popularized in a 1931 novel by a guy named, what was his name? Oh, I have his name right here. Paul Claudel. He was a famous, he was anti-Semite though, this French author. And he wrote something called The Satin Slipper. And in The Satin Slipper, he talks about how King Philip II of Spain uses a crystal skull that's lit by the sun to prophesize.
Oh, wild.
Yeah. And this novel was introduced in the 1930s. This introduced those crystal skulls as prophecy concepts through this French occultist Masonic author. But the real story with King Philip, let's go to the next pic. And this gets into what you were talking about with the mummies and the saints' bodies. The real story of King Philip II and the skull thing is his son was chasing after a maid, trying to rape a maid, and fell and hit his head and went into a coma. So they bring the court doctors, they can't heal him. So they finally bring the dead body of a saint and place it next to him.
Oh, wow.
And it wakes him up. But they had to knock a hole in his head too, though. They do is curetting. There's a thing where,
right?
yeah. Got to let something out. It's like bloodletting. And it's funny, they didn't give him bloodletting.
Those humors.
Yeah. And it says the reason they didn't give him bloodletting was because he was sweating profusely. So that meant some liquid was coming out. Something was coming out. So cool. We don't have to bloodlet him. But we do have to knock a hole in his head. And that's because people thought that it's an ancient form of surgery. They just thought if you could knock a hole in your head, it would
reduce pressure or some other kind of interesting stuff, expand your mental capacities,
Yeah.
Same thing with like head binding rituals, right? A lot of that was believed it instilled some kind of intelligence or nobility,
Well, that's what we're talking about next is head binding and nobility. So if I can get you to take away something today, if anything, it's not about whether these skulls are Anunnaki, Nephilim, DNA, and whether they're born that way. What I want you to get is that all around the planet where there's burials in royalty in ancient times, they were binding their skulls to look different from the regular tribes. Whether it's in China, Mayans, Africa, all over. Where are these skulls from? They found these in Bavaria, by Munich. But they're Bulgarian DNA. They're Bulgarian brides that were traded to the tribes, Teutonic tribes, for intermarriages, and they had head binding done on them. And what I'd like to talk about today is not the head binding in Peru, which you're going to see a lot of videos on if you go on YouTube. And I've been to Peru and I went to those museums. That stuff's real. It's really there. But I'm talking about the European, the Scythian, the Hun, the Slavic, the Central Asian, the Chinese head binding. And there's a big predominance of it in ancient times. There's a lot of evidence. Like, let's hit the next pic. That's the word. Macrocephaloid. The long-headed people. What is that? Hippocrates talks about them. They talked about these people. They talked about the Huns. They said that people do this to establish that they're aristocracy. That's how you established it. You would do that. Now, it's really simple to do it. When I studied to be MT, you had to do childbirth, and part of the thing they teach you is during childbirth, there's lots of things that can happen. The umbilical cord could get wrapped around. It could be a breech bird to come out backwards, or sometimes the plates with the head, because of the soft tissue, could get pressed together on the baby. And so that's natural. Sometimes it could come out misshaped, and they'll reshape the doctor in modern times. But in ancient times, if you were royalty or elite class, then you would be binded. Hit the next pic. That's one of the examples right there. That's an Asian example. Just pieces of board, and it's not the same direction. There's different styles of head binding in different cultures. And there's some regularities, and there's some differences depending on the directions in some of them. But in general, for the royalty, it's flat and going up. Long head. Oh. Now, in terms of, does it happen naturally? Sure. There's different, like I was talking about the soft plate, but there's also some people were born on the planet with bigger heads and skulls, and it fuses together because there's like these little ridges. And we're going to get into that even more in the next episode. But there's some people where they're naturally elongated. Now, mind you, if I reshape the skull, does he have a bigger brain? No. It's the same amount of liquid, let's say. It's just the cup has been shaped differently, but it's the same amount of liquid, same amount of volume. It sometimes actually makes the body operate worse because the body is already it's already functions efficiently, and so misshaping it sometimes doesn't make it. You know, like when they stretch the neck with the rings,
Right.
and if they take it off, you fall over.
Yeah.
It doesn't make you do anything better. But there are some things you can modify in the body that makes you faster or do some things better. This doesn't really increase cranial capacity.
It's
Not
just
at all.
cosmetic.
Yeah, it's cosmetic, and it might make it actually worse. Just so you know.
Right.
But if you were born with a bigger cranium and had a bigger brain, you might potentially have more brain power. Just saying. But now, here's the thing. You're going to see that people are talking about, well, they're born this way, and the mom's that way, and the son's that way. There's not really that many examples of that. And there was one example, and they're hiding it if it's true. So as a genetic trait, let's say, well, someone has red hair and freckles, and the son is born with red hair and freckles. The mom has an elongated skull, and the son is born with an elongated skull. No, that's not necessarily a passable genetic trait. And if it was, those evidence that they have, it's being suppressed. People talk about it's being suppressed or what have you. So yeah, so that's where we're at in that. And who cares about that? I care about the fact that around the planet where you find royal burials, you find them with, it's called ACM, artificial cranial modification. And that would set them apart from the rest of the tribe. The tribe would know, okay, you're one of the special ones. You know, it's a process. Even, they even found one in Notre Dame. Underneath Notre Dame was a burial with a priest and a noble. And the noble had the forehead. And this was what, 14th century noble. So they were doing it in the 14th century. And then all the way back, as far back as 12,000 years ago in China, Central Asia. So let's hit the next picture. Right there, Malta, the island of Malta. The hypogeum, we've talked about that in the catacombs and the agape love tables. And how down in the catacombs they did parties, and we went wild with growing mushrooms on dead people, brewing beer from dead people, having orgies down there, doing wild stuff. And we didn't make it up. Well, I'm just telling you about these other books out there. And we're just sharing with you. In Malta, they did find at the hypogeum unusual amount of bones and skulls in the thousands and thousands, up to 30,000. Like a mass burial site. They turned the hypogeum into a mass burial site. Some of them were elongated. A lot of them were elongated. There were the articles, National Geographic in the 20s and 30s, several articles. And then in modern times, when scientists go there to try to look for it, they're like, nah, we don't have that. That was made up. There's nothing. But we know that there was a predominance of elongated skulls in East Europe at a certain time. Dealing with, and so by the way, this is the Chapel of the Skull in Malta. You can see all the skulls embedded. Thousands of skulls. Fascination with it. Hit the next pic. Right here, the Huns. When I mean the Huns, Hungarian. I was talking about Bulgarian brides. Attila the Hun. Central Asia, all the way to the Scythian. There's even I saw a new book that came out. I was even looking up this morning, talking about beyond the Black Sea, elongated skulls in the Black Sea. The predominance of this. And different authors talk about it in ancient times. That even amongst the Scythians was the headlining.
That's so cool. That's crazy. Yeah.
and here's on the coins. And this is he's a king. His name is King Gilla. He was King Gilla II, I think, of the Alchon Huns. And there's lots of references. You type in this and you can see different coins with his head like that, different pictures of Huns with their heads shaped like that going into battle. And I remember growing up as a kid, they always have the little top knot, the Cossack looking Hungarian top knot. You know what I'm talking about?
Vaguely, I think, you
Where
know.
your head shaved and you got that ponytail.
Right.
Well, part of it is because they had elongated skulls. And they'll find that in history. A lot of burials. Yeah. So we're going to go to the next pick. Boom. And this is another character that's related to that. And we're going across Central Asian steppes, going from the Huns into now here's Afghanistan, Persian region, Afghanistan. And this is Rostam, who's a famous 7th century Persian hero who has an elongated skull. And you type in Rostam, elongated skull on Wikipedia or Google, and you'll find tons of these stories and pictures about him.
Right. And Rustam is kind of like the national hero of,
you've heard, yes.
Yeah. You know, he's kind of like a, you know, in all of the classical mythology, big deal. Yeah. That's great.
Well, Rostam is part of an archetype or prototype. He has an elongated head. He wears sometimes panther skins. Sometimes. His horse is even spotted. You see that?
Right.
And what he's doing is he's knocking off the dragon's head. And
Amazing.
Later on, Rostam turns that dragon into a suit of armor, which has magic powers. This dragon skin with magic powers, the talking head, elongated skulls, it's going to become an archetype. We'll see. Just so I'm planting some seeds in your subconscious now. Yeah. So, and now that we're in this region, Afghanistan, like the central, from Central Asia into China. Let's go to the next pick. Boom. Fukuro Kuju. Now this, god of longevity, Japan. Notice the forehead. Ego forehead. Famous for having the boom. And the dragon staff. Elongated skulls and dragons do go together. You know, you'll see that by the end of the couple episodes. It's part of it. Like I said, longevity. And that's Fukuro Kuju is a representation of Shu Lao, which is a Chinese god. Like, go to the next pick. Boom.
Oh, wow.
You got a big old head right there, an alabastron head.
Oh, my gosh.
Go to the next pick. Go to the, and you could see, that you might have seen this pick. It's
right.
a Chinese. If you've been to the Chinese curio store, you've seen it. Shu Lao, longevity. It's a theme. The dragon holding the dragon staff. There's more to this. There's much more. It's not accidental. Go to the next pick. Boom. Buddha. So, when I was typing in Buddha, you know, you always see Buddha with the top knot.
Right.
Yeah. No. Type in the word Ushnisha on Google, and that's a Ushnisha.
Okay.
And what it says, it's a fleshy protuberance on the top of Buddha's head. It's not hair.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's a knot. And they
So
know
he's
that.
wrapping his locks around something.
Yeah, no, he had a knot. It's a fleshy protuberance. Something was growing on his head, on the Dalai Buddha's head, I'm telling you. And they know it. And so part of there, he has the snake shield as well. And the number 7, like I didn't even mention, but half these myths, the number 7's popping up. Snakes, elongated skulls, and the number 7. It gets deep. And here, you can see he's on the snake, sitting on the snake, and the snake shield's coming up over. over is a protuberance on his head, which isn't a knot. I mean, which isn't a top knot of hair. So let's go to the next pick. Boom, Pericles.
Right.
Plutarch talks about it, and all these Greek authors, they talk about what's up with homie's head.
That's true.
He'd wear a special helmet, just like these other people I'm talking about. This is a thing in ancient times. It's just not cosmetically not vogue right now, so you ain't seeing that. But in ancient times, if your head was regular, you was nobody.
So this was, I guess, like a sign of his superiority or power or whatever.
Something. And like I said, it could happen naturally. It can be done through binding. And there's more to the story. Hit the next pick. Let's go to, here we are, Egypt. Look at the Nefertiti on the right. King Tut. King Tut's head right there.
Yeah, that's wild.
Akhenaten.
Yeah.
18th dynasty.
In the bottom. And that's the one who tried to form his own form of monotheism, right? To the sun, with him as the sole messenger, connector to God.
They got rid of Ammon.
Right.
And then so they got mad. They came back and got rid of them all and erased them from history.
Yep. They tried to destroy all of his images.
And what we learn is that you need both. We need the Aden and the Ammon. We need balance. It's much better that way. So this is a thing in ancient Egypt with the main pharaohs. You had to have a nice skull. And that whole like I said, 18th dynasty, Akhenaten, Nefertiti, and part of that, see on her helmet there, she would have a snake, that cobra, just like Buddha. People with the big skulls get snakes attached to those big skulls. It's just part of the iconography. It goes together.
Wild.
So let's hit the next pick. Boom, Africa. Tribes in Africa are still doing it. That's where you can still, Africa is the last place on earth where people are still doing genital mutilation, scarification of the face, head binding, putting the things in the neck, and still a wild place. That's an example. It hurts. And you would have to be royalty to have it done to you as a kid because your life's different. You're coddled. It's not like, kids aren't slaves. In ancient times, normal kids are slaves or workers. That's why you have a bunch of kids. But if you're being coddled to be modified, it's for a shamanic reason, to set you apart from others. So that's part of it.
Right. And a lot of this culture it's beautiful, and people should be free to do whatever they want. And especially if they have these traditions, as long as it's not like detrimental to the people, I guess.
Well, and it should be forced on the kids.
Yeah.
It should be later on. You're older. Like I've had piercings. I've had tattoos. I'm cool with all that stuff. But I would have not been cool if mom did it to me as a kid.
Yeah, hard to argue with that. I don't know.
So talking about this head binding, it's universal across the planet. Like I said, Mayans, Africans, Chinese, Egyptians. Also in Iraq, we were talking about Scythians, Persians. It's a universal. So they did find some really wild burials in Iraq. And this goes Eridu region, and it's Ubayyad, Tel Ubayyad. And go to the next pick. So they found a series of, but before we get there, these are, go to the next one. Yeah, look at, before we even get to Iraq, that's still Africa right there. Some of the head binding. I'm trying to put some images in your mind. These are some gods and head binding and what we're trying to recreate here. So boom, go to the next pick. And this is Tel Aviv. That's where they found these weird, you know what the term is? Ophidian. Means reptilian.
Right. No, I know for sure what it means. It's just it also goes back to like the those the Ophites and all these different cults, right, with the snake worship.
Yeah, and so
And it
this is
gets
really
into some
wrong.
of the weirdness with aliens. A lot of people speculate about this stuff. You'll see these images all over some of the darker, weirder places
Yeah,
online.
right. So forget the aliens. All you need to know is that they found these figurines in the burial next to people that had elongated skulls that were headboarded. They weren't born that way. They didn't not necessarily having Anunnaki alien DNA, magic powers. They were just headboarded. They're royalty, and they believed in an archaic form of religion. And you might notice on the figurines they have those little balls attached to them, like the Ephesus Artemis. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah, for sure.
Those weird.
The nods that are sometimes are described as like beehives or breasts. Other times I've heard people put forth that they're testicles.
Yeah.
But either way, there's those protuberances or grapes. I've seen sometimes they're related to fruit. There are these protuberances that are on that Artemis at Ephesus statue.
And the one on the right is nursing a baby. So it's not like there's some, like they have characteristics of humans that they got to nurse and they give birth. They walk upright. And so in ancient times, they were trying to modify themselves to look a certain way. I'm not telling you who or what or why. I'm just saying there's evidence that people were modifying themselves to look a certain way. And that meant that you're a royalty if you look like a certain type of a person. We'll leave it at that. So, boom, let's go to the next. All right. So now we're going to take it home, and then we're going to get Ammon on. We have the good doctor joining us. Here, this is England. Bran the Blessed.
Yep. This is that story of Branwen in the Mabinogion, right? Which is where she gets married to the King of Ireland, but her brother Ethnician, he mutilates all of the horses during their wedding ceremony when he's drunk. And then the King of Ireland is so offended by this. When they get back home, like he promises to not be offended, to not punish anyone after he gets some money and things are settled. But when he gets home with Branwen, he's still so upset by the horse mutilation that he has her punished by putting her in the kitchens and making her work. And then she's kind of tormented. And in her torment, she winds up singing a song to the starling. And the starling flies back to her brother, Bran the Blessed, who's a magic giant, and tells him of the abuse she's suffering. So then they wind up going to go rescue her, and it ensues this two-country epic war. And as the story goes on, Branwen has a magic cauldron that can bring the dead back, and there's all this really intense stuff. But in the end, everyone dies, and Branwen takes the head of Bran back to Wales and is said to have installed it in a mound and created a new kingdom where it's born. I was actually talking to Old Boy about this. There's some really interesting stuff in the Mabinogion. It's something that needs to be dug into a lot more. It has been kind of Christianized, but there's still a lot of incredible magic imagery, like this cauldron that raises the dead, the taking of the skull and installing it into a sacred mound, and they're creating a new king dynasty from the dead. And the magic of talking to the birds, right? Like it's a really interesting text. Everyone should check it out.
Well, there's a little more to it. Mm-hmm. In some of the myths, the head is buried underneath the Tower of London.
Right, that's true.
And you'll notice that it's on a conveyance. I want to drive this point home because that's the last couple of pictures we're going to drive home. It's moving. It even has like a spear at the front of it. It's like a weapon, and it talks.
Yeah,
it's a prophecy. So it's a head with no body that gives prophecy that moves on a type of.
Sorry, go ahead. Finish your point.
Oh no! 'Cause what were you going to say?
All this imagery makes me think of Orpheus after he gets ripped apart by the Maenads. His head floats down into the ocean and winds up on the island of Lesbos, right? And so again, you have it. This time it's the waters, but it's that prophetic head in motion again. It's kind of interesting.
Go to the next pic. Right there. That's what you're talking about. That's the head of Orpheus. But there's more to it. What is he on?
A lyre, right?
Yes. It's conveyance. I want to drive this point home. In the snakes and the heads. The head, Orpheus' head, in some parts of the myth, is attacked by a snake. The head that gives the prophecy. And it's attached to, in a lot of images, you'll see it's attached to the lyre itself. Like how Bran is attached to that kind of mound or shield.
Yeah, it's like a shield.
All right, go to the next pic. All right, let's get into John. Salome and the head of John. In the Bible, it's in Matthew. I think it's Matthew 14:8. Salome says, "Bring me his head on a charger." And some people will just say it's the term "head on a platter." You might have heard that term, "head on a platter."
Right.
It's a little different. No, it's a head on a charger. Now, in the story, we know that John's head, some people talk about it, flies around Jerusalem talking to Herod. And some people call that Le Danse Ariel.
Right.
Which is talk about that. They can animate the head and make it fly, and it blows wind when there's no wind. But if you'll notice, you see John's head there. Well, you see something behind it. There's the halo, but it's on the charger itself. Do you see that? That gold plate? It's on the gold plate flying in the air. So go to the next pic. Yeah, there it is. And so there's different heads that they think is John's head at different relics in Europe that they collect. And this one is in a church somewhere being protected, and it's attached to a metal plate, this charger plate. And so when you look up the etymology of charger, there's a little more to the story. It means battle horse in one of the meanings. A charger charges off into battle.
Right.
It means a firearm to discharge. It means a charger, which conveys electrical current, like to charge your phone, charge something up. It also means like cargo, like a car, a conveyance. And in its ultimate form, it means a conveyance of heat, something that conveys heat. So when Salome asks for the head, she doesn't ask for it on a plate. She asks for it on a charger. And this charger can fly. And you'll see that in the iconography and art, but also in the term missile. Like the missile is like a rocket, a missile. Yes. But in an ancient form of what a missile is, it's a shield. It's a flying shield.
This connects us. I keep thinking of this image of the Bacchic rites too, and the Coriobantes who beat on the shields. And there's this whole thing about how the drum and the shield are synonymous. And that's one of the symbolon is one of the passwords to get through the gates of the underworld, and it's connected again to this losing of your head thing too. So having the head on the shield, that's this very deep mystery image,
Next pick. Medea. Wow. Medea's head on a shield. Aegis. And there's more to it. What that means. If you look up what the shield means, the name of the shield that the head's on, it means a violent windstorm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And the shield produced a sound. And in some versions of it, the shield is covered with dragon skin.
Right.
And so
Ammon has talked about that. We'll have to pick his brain.
So there's more to this. What the shield is, that's a charger plate. That's John's head on the charger. It's something that flies in the air and it makes a sound. And you put the head on it. There's more to the story. Like even Zeus, his shield is a thunderbolt.
Right.
And because a shield, some people think of a shield as stationary, just stays there. No, the shield, it's like a chakra.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like the spinning disc weapon that you see in the Mahabharata and in different Indian texts. That's become kind of like that yogic and New Age image of the spinning chakra energy wheel. But it's also a weapon. It's a medieval. It's a weapon that they used. It's talked about a lot in the Mahabharata, and it's like this discus that you throw and has a blade.
So with that, yeah, we should see if Ammon's around.
Right. So Ammon, if you're around, come join us.
Yeah.
He's finished his presentation here. But yeah, that was wild.
Oh, definitely.
So what do you think? I wanted to ask you about some of the more weirder takes, because we've been touching on some of this stuff. But like, what is your take, Dion, on the elongated skulls being related to pre-hominid species like Neanderthals, or, you know, potentially some kind of weird alien fish reptilian people pre-Earth, you know, that you see in some of these more weirder, darker places when we're talking about this stuff, and how they're trying to maintain these kind of ancient lineages, and what was once genetically passed down then became physically passed down, you know, through manipulation. What are your thoughts on that stuff? Did you find anything related to it? It seems pretty all unlikely, but you know.
Well, as them being a form of Neanderthal or something, that could be possible. Maybe we look at different versions of ourselves going way back. We don't look the same as now. That could be possible. We used to have bigger teeth, whatever, blah, blah, blah. That could be possible. But whether I think they're aliens or on I tell people when it comes to the alien story, aliens don't pay my bills.
Right.
So until the alien pays my bills, then I'll rip them. I haven't seen one face to face. I ain't seen it face to face. I believe it's there. I know if there ain't nothing out there, then I'm crazy. But they ain't paying my bills yet.
Hi, Ammon. Thanks for joining us. How's it going?
I'm doing really well. It's good to see you, Snappy and Dion. It's nice to see you. But I tell you, I watched the whole thing. I was a little bit queasy there. I got a little bit queasy near parts of it. It's okay. I got a thing about that whole trephination. Yeah, I've come across that in the text. The Egyptians. Oh God, yeah, quite an art. The binding and whatnot. Boy, I tell you what. I don't know why it makes me so queasy, but it does. We have the dog heads too, right? The kuones, right? Those somehow they're doing something to the shape of the head that makes it dog shaped. That's what they call it anyway. Yeah, it makes sense about their funny shaped hats too. You know what I mean? Yeah, a little bit.
So question there.
Yeah.
So when we're talking about the dog heads, the cynocephalae, it's not so much that they're dogs; it's that they modified their heads and shaped them different, and so that's the nickname that people are giving them. It's dog heads. Is that what I kind of heard you say?
Well, I don't want to jump too far because as a linguist, all I'm looking at is they're identified as having a different magic dialect in the PGM. So, okay, that's about all I can say about it. Why are they called dog-headed? Yeah, that's a tough one. Did they do it in a way that made it look a certain, like kind of doggish? Yeah, I'm not certain. All I know is that they've got a separate dialect. So, and it's part of this whole thing that the Orphic Vox is picking up. These are groups who are performing the mysteries, right? So that Bakken stuff is way in there. I love that Bacchus was on the Indian side as well. You're going through some of that. Oh God, the skulls and everything. Holy mackerel.
Well, it's
Yeah.
even interesting. We have like there's a couple epitaphs of Dionysus I found. I can't remember them in the Greek, but they were saying like young and Indian looking and bearded with the locks of hair. And I'm like, okay, that sounds exactly like an Indian yogi. They even say he's coming from India. He's got the dreaded locked hair and he's got a beard. That seems pretty sadhu like to me. I thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's so much kind of wildness. I wanted to ask you about this image, though, of the Aegis shield and the bearing of the head upon the shield. Like, because you see that in so many of these rites and in some of the, the processions, right? You have the choreobands beating the shields and then they have the head on the shield. What do you make of all of that, Ammon?
Yeah, first time I had it explained to me linguistically is that shield it's from the Greek root ikes or ig, which is goat, and it's actually a skin that they're going to be using as a stretch skin shield. And on that, now it can be presented that way, or it can be presented as it's more like a mantle. It's a covering of the chest that is that goat skin, treated goat skin. And on it, very famously, you see this in like the early Athenian stuff, right? Athena is always associated with, it's truly Zeus's, and people don't realize that. Yeah, okay, it's truly Zeus. But where do we always see it in all of the Greek literature? It's always being used by Athena. So she wears it, and it's got the head of Medusa. It's got the head of Medusa on it, affixed to it. And you guys were looking at some of the art, and what does that mean? Because she turns away. That force that's on the goat skin turns away the darkness that is not the beauty of the Virgin. Yeah, it's a protection, a form of protection. And because it's the head of the Medusa that's there, it's a thing of fright. It's holy, so that you were not supposed to look at it, right? If you look at it, it turns you to stone. So what's going on with that? Oh God, it's such beautiful culture all woven in there. Now, why is it her head? Right? Why is it her head? I wanted to ask you guys, what is the significance of the power? You talk about the Aegis. Remember, this is the power of God, the power of Zeus, right? That you're describing here. It's in the hands of the Virgin, but it's the power of Zeus. And it's got that Medusa's head right on the middle of it.
So I keep thinking of this image of the eye, right? Because we have the witch's eye, you have the mother of Medea idea, which her name is like to see. Medea is always using that eye magic throughout the whole Argonautica, and it keeps kind of getting more intense. You see it as well with like, I just was reading Ligeia and going through all of Ligeia. Again, it's all of this kind of eye imagery where the eyes are kind of like casting this witch curse, and they're the source of this power, both this abyss and this light. They also represent the stars. Like Poe connects them to the Dioscuri, and to like the rape of Leda. It's pretty wild stuff, right? But I keep thinking like the eyes are such a central part of the head, and they're the portal of the witch's power in all of the literature, right? It's either her potions or her stare that's casting her magic, right?
It's a power that is transmitted through the ops, they called it. And people will translate that as eye, but it really is, ophthalmos is eye. Like we think eyeball. The ops for them, and this is a concept that you have to stretch to, right? I have to phrase it. The ops is the power that is within one's gaze. So the ability to bring one under your control, somebody under control with your ops, is this thing, right? It's not the Oma The Oma di Case is the eye of justice that you see, and the Egyptians nailed that one too, right? Probably stole it from Pelasgians. Pelasgians were there before the Egyptians were anything. But it's not that eye. The Alps is a gaze, a power, and so yeah, it's associated with the witches. And I've always wondered, you're harvesting the head of the Medusa, and I just can't overlook the fact that in the cult writings of the Lithica, they talk about taking that gem from the center of the dragon's brain. They don't say brain, they say head, right? After you've removed the head. You guys were talking about Pineal. Was the dragons were on the psychotropic drugs. So did they concentrate this stuff in the side, inside the middle of their head, in that pineal gland possibility? And yeah, you could use it, give you crazy visions. You get up to the third heaven with St. Paul, you know what I mean? Be like, wow. Yeah. Is that it? Yeah, there's a lot of within the magic. It's so intertwined with the very concrete drug use and existence of our biology that you really can't. I hate to bring. It's like with Dion asking about what are the dog heads. I've tried to figure that out, and Dion, I don't have any kind of evidence to back it up. All I can see is that there's some kind of malformation or macrocephaly, possibly. And since we know they're doing stuff like aerating the skull, right? I mean, oh God, it makes me want to, makes me a little bit queasy, right? Because the idea of doing it, but they explain why they're doing it medically as well. They have a medical explanation for it. Whew. Right? Skull binding, like you're talking about, right? What's the difference between that kind of stuff and the body modification that's, make a kid a eunuch? Now, you guys talked about the kids. Should the kids have a say, right? And I just want to make a note that these very same societies that ultimately produce democracy, these very same societies are not taking the opinions of their children. They are performing these in a way to create something that is a positive or heightened experience. And why is it that we want to say they can't do that? I noticed that what we're talking about. I thought I'd throw that out there and see what you guys thought.
Morality. That's a good question. Morality now versus morality then. Life expectancy now versus life expectancy back then. That is a hot topic. And also consent. And when am I cognitively developed enough to give you consent? It's funny because you look at issues of, like, in some states you can get married at 17. You go to the next state and it's it's a month different, 6 months different, a year different. You're going to jail. So this is a gray area. But in ancient times, they wouldn't even blink the eye. They would not have blinked the eye at any of the stuff that we're talking about.
You're doing this stuff under the authority of the Great Mother anyway, right? So, I mean, you actually have a temple structure that's there to support you, right? So when you're putting your child through the fire, when you're burning off their mortality, and the kid's screaming, and the nurses are like, oh my God, and mother's there and she's freaking out, right? When all of that stuff is happening, it's all under the protection of the Great Mother, and you wouldn't question whether or not the child has the ability to make a decision that the Great Mother makes. Right? That you got to realize that's why abortion is not really the same issue in antiquity that it is today, because it was accepted that the woman who was choosing to abort a fetus, that she was acting as the Great Mother. and that's part of it's even part of the mythology, right? She's pictured as bringing in on one side death and on the other side life in this kind of circle. She does it in the cave with the Ouroboros on the outside of it, right? So yeah, and there's a whole support structure there for that. So if you want to, I was talking just today with someone on a podcast. It'll be coming out in a week and a week or two, but it's in the context of Christians who have managed to deprogram themselves, right, and managed to come to a place that they are able to pull their head out of the vapor, right, and to realize what it's all about. And you cannot underestimate the very, very practical wisdom that they used in antiquity, primarily from the Bronze Age, and that is that the plasticity of our existence can be formed and molded by these magical elements that you and I would call, it's just straight up biology, right? And what are they doing to alter the biology? You talk about the Medusa, that is altered biology. She is under the influence of drugs that are altering her actual physical growth. So take a 7-year-old, and put her on a constant infusion of a mixture of venoms and drugs that most of us wouldn't even get close to, things that cause severe physical, if you want to say malformations, you could, but you could also say, it's just highly reactive in the genome. It brings out these traits that are just, throwbacks, right? Activating the brain. It messes with the amygdala, makes them more aggressive, right? They're all more, that head that's on the shield, those Medusae, there's not one Medusa, there's Medusae. And those temple priestesses, you can't get close to them. They're half viper, right? And they have a resistance to the poisons that you knock you down in a second, turn you to stone, Bran. If you're lucky, they can bring you back. If you're not, you're going to end up your last moments will be your heart stopping as you turn freeze. Right?
And it's ironic that the toxins are in their hair.
Yeah.
That they're running the arrows are collecting the toxins through their hair, through their heads.
Yeah. It's only functional, right? And they have the offerings of the hair anyway, and this stuff is all coming out. The societies are way more integrated with the use of these drugs, but your shield and your aegis, that power, if we understand how that power works, you'll be in the shoes of those who lived the experience that produced for us democracy, right? These are the roots. People are saying now, believe it or not.
So wait. So we're 43, 44 episodes deep talking about the craziest, fringiest stuff on YouTube, which is the roots of democracy.
Yeah, right.
Yep. And it's so wild, eh?
Yeah, they now people are saying, I'm going to go on some show and I'm going to debate a couple of dudes. And one of them says that Christianity produced democracy and marriage. I thought that was great. And marriage, imagine the hubris. Imagine the hubris to think that.
It's such a short-lived image of the world. Like, what do you mean?
Right?
Is that a Paulinian marriage? St. Paul style?
Yeah. That's pushing the thorn, baby. Right? You know what it is.
Really awesome lecture that Mandy just sent me that I've been listening to. I haven't finished it all yet, but it's by this professor David Wengrow, and it's called Cities Against the State. And he's arguing like that the earliest forms of kind of like mutualism and these early like democratic societies, like direct democracies, were developed in the Georgian region, in the Black Sea, or along the Crimea and such, by these kind of tribal steppe peoples, that they had a ginormous urban base that hasn't been fully explored yet, and is continuing to not be explored because of the ongoing conflict, you know?
That's funny you say that. I was checking out something in a Crimean region where they were not living off of the cow products. The cows were penned up. They were collecting the fertilizer from the cows to grow peas, pea protein. We're talking about pea protein feeding thousands of people in an urban context in ancient times. Not because there's more protein coming from the peas than from the protein in the cows per square inch, per real estate. So the fertilizer would make more protein with the peas than just killing the cows to get steaks. And so it's actually, people are re-examining the paradigm of how urban centers were in the past in the Georgia region. People don't know about what's going on. We just look at USSR or Islam in Turkey, and there's a whole bunch of history before that we don't know about in terms of East Europe. And East Europe is like Mexico to Europe. It's
Amen. Amen, Dion. Can I just say that what you just said needs to be shouted from the rooftop? This is the future of archaeology, right? This is the period, this is the time, this is the cultural group that's going to show us what our really where our origins are with respect to civilization. You said the democracy comes out of them. And you can trace this. I'll throw this out there for any scholars who want to write books. You can trace this through the development of the oracles. That's all you need to do, because it is their process. The oracular process is their process. It's their fumigation. And you can watch the control of the Bronze Age end up being in the hands of these women, these sibyls, these priestesses. You know, they're so profoundly impactful that, you know, even as late as Rome of the first century, they are still preserving the books that came out of this, because it's everything. It keeps their society moving. It creates this protective civilization, right? So you're not a barbarian, right? Don't be a barbarian. Follow what they've given us. There's a golden age. People have not discovered the golden age, but it's these horse cultures. You know, I don't know what it was. I don't know what they had in them. When you find out that in Latin, the Roman tongue, the word for horse isn't horse. To us, it's like, oh, horse. And you think of a horse. There's no association of the horse, that sound, with what it is. Do you know what it was for the Romans? The sound represented estrus, heat, right? Equi is heat. So when they thought of horses, they thought of that heat that is produced. Have you ever seen a mare in heat, right? Wow, there's a reproductive and biological. Yeah, of course there is, right? It's freaking anthropology. Yeah, love it. I wish I knew what the dog heads looked like.
You know, I'd like to build on that, because you left off where we're talking about the shields and the charger. With John, the head of John the Baptist being on a charger. And when you look up the etymology of the word charger, the first thing, it's a war horse that's running into battle. It's a firearm. It conducts electrical energy. It's, you know, it's a form of power. It's a form of heat. You know, that we're talking about. That the head is on. Where John's head is on something special. It's not just a plate.
And it's like, I keep looking at these rites, right? We looked at the Mabinogion, we looked at Orpheus, we looked at John the Baptist. With John the Baptist and with Bran the Blessed, we have their heads then leading to the establishment of new dynastical kings, right? With the death of John, we get the rise of Jesus. And with Branwen in that story, they talk about how he's buried and the site becomes London, you know, the rise of this empire. And it seems to be associated with these magic rites and prophecy, right? These heads also spew prophetic words from the grave. What do you think about all that, Ammon? And are there other examples besides like Orpheus that we see in the Greek? Or
Yeah, famous heads on shield. And what is it with the whole head thing and causing people again back to the Aegis? Remember, that's a symbol of God's power, right? It's not God's power isn't a stick of dynamite, right? It's a bolt. It's a fiery flux. They describe it as. And what is that? It's something that is the ops of the Medusa. Yeah, what we do is we harvest that. We dragons harvest that power. And you have to develop this process through a very rigorous control of biology. And that's what they're doing. What are the heads? As for the platter, right, versus the charger, I know in Matthew, what is it, Nipsa or something like that? Can be a plank, or it can be some kind of container. I don't know. Besides, I want to shove one into that Orphic John the Baptist head genre. I want to shove the Templars and what they were doing with the skull that they walked around with. I want to know if this something practical that they're all, it's a symbol of the cult. It's something they use. Everybody knows about the skull head, right? Because we drink out of it, right? What do we drink out of it? We drink out of that same stuff that the Medusa was using on those boys, right? When you burn off mortality. How else do you think you make dragons? Do you want a dragon? And a dragon in antiquity is just a temple guardian, not of any kind of temple, but of a relic, famous ones. And they're getting destroyed in antiquity by people like Heracles, right? Who has interest in the artifact, and he's always coming out of it with what's the one thing he gets? Heracles, what does he get? Odysseus, what is he out looking for?
drugs.
yeah, it's the Hydra's poison, right? It's that real stuff. You know what it does to people sexually, right? You can take a person and turn them on, right? In a way that's forced upon them. You can take a person, a captive. If you wanted to, you could make a trade out of this. You could make a trade out of it. You could capture people, capture boys and girls, and raise them to be dragons. Yeah, that's the real stuff. You know what I mean? Disney came out with something about dragons years ago, right? No. Let's train real dragons. And what do those end up being? They end up being children that you put through a chemical process to turn them into something that's more than human, something that's visionary, and something that can bring something beautiful to the world. It was those Medusae did. They're priestesses of Athena. They're virgin priestesses. How come? They're sacrificing them all over the place, right? Why? So what does that head? What does that head do? It's if you're a Templar and you have licked the scrotum or the glands of your master, and from its purple been brought to the place that you have eyes to see, you know what to do, just like Heracles' dogs know what to do. What is the dog-headed thing? Why do their eyes ooze purple? I want to know this stuff. It's beautiful culture that we don't have anymore. You guys are bringing it up. It makes me a little bit queasy. Does it make you guys a little queasy?
I'm vegetarian, So check this out. If they would headbind, because people will say, well, they wouldn't give them venoms, and why would they do that? And now look, there's so much evidence of just the head binding alone. If a mother's willing to take her baby's skull and put boards on it and wrap it up, why wouldn't she be willing to give him some venom?
Good point.
Or circumcise, man. Think about it. If you as a mother and you have your child and you're going to cut off this foreskin, that's a dedication, right? And they understood in antiquity that this dedication was sacred and it's protected. This is exactly who you are as a woman. Notice these rites are all under the umbrella. On the Greek side, they're all under the umbrella of the women. So there's a lot of things that we aren't. It's the head of a Medusa being held by a woman, a virgin, right? I mean, there's nothing masculine about it. And it's from this that we're getting the first king of Athens, the ultimately the prime mover of democracy comes from the virgin, from some semen that was ejaculated, took it with some wiped it off, get out of here, you pervert, right? And wiped it off, and on the ground it grew from that chthonian attachment. What did you have? The first king of Athens, and he was half snake. Can you believe that? We've had kings in our histories that we don't even realize that they weren't really us. Half serpent. I want to know, what does it do when you burn off a child's mortality and they end up as one of these extra tall, kick-ass, aggressive humanoids, right?
You said half serpent?
Yeah.
That's part of what we're finding in the royal burials is modification. And the one at Tel Abba or Ubaid, they had little serpent fetishes and talismans with them. So they're showing you what they're already trying to look like or modify themselves to look like. They're modifying their skulls, and they have little toys or little dolls of these reptilian, Ophidian is the word, creatures with it. Some people can call it dog-headed, or we'll call it reptilian, Ophidian, serpentine-like, Melusian. And it seems that royalty in the past has a strong association not only with snakes, but trying to look like snakes.
When you've got snakes in everything you're doing, Dion, I mean, when they have it down to a science where if you get bitten, they know what antidotes to give you to counteract that level of technology from that golden age. That's insurpassable. That knowledge is so important. When you can give a woman the right combination of plants to cause herself to abort with a procedure that she does herself, and all it requires is a little pill, right? Imagine that. That's where you get civilization coming from. Birth control is directly running right the straight same line that democracy is. You're not going to get it without it. That freedom for a woman to be able to control herself, it's the same freedom to control your child, right? They've got the gender switching conflict with the Orthodox, with all the Putinescas, with all the evangelicals, and it's huge, right? They're talking about prosecuting parents for saying my child has an uncertain gender and we're going to choose this to allow them to go through this process, right? Again, you can take somebody who's hermaphroditic, and this is how they've been dealing with it in the past, and those people can be prosecuted. That ability to transform the body, that ability to bring out the potential that's there, that genetic potential, that power is directly associated with the same historical forces that said tyrants must die. You must stop tyranny. We have to stand for decay. Oh, I love
No,
it.
it's true. It's wild, right? Because a lot of these intersex people wind up becoming castrated or sterilized, reduced to one specific gender, and they have that enforced upon them at an early age without any decision, right? And based upon our gender binaries or based upon what the parents decide. And that's something we got to consider in this. And then there's also, like you're saying with trans kids, right? The medical science often shows that delaying of puberty is very, very healthy for these kids. It's helpful, right? It's for these people until they can figure it out and come to a maturity and make decisions for themselves. There has to be this kind of freedom of bodily autonomy, I believe, fundamentally. Even when we're talking about, like you brought up abortion earlier with women, like it should be the right of the person whose body is being discussed here, right? It gets so wild with this puritanical kind of ideas that we want to place on people. I understand wanting to protect children and wanting to protect people. But if we have a strong system of medical doctors and we have the families and the child involved in all of the discussion, it's a bit of a different thing here, is it not? Like no one is just randomly transitioning children. These children who are going through hormone replacement therapy or what have you have gone through the process of seeking medical help, and their parents are recognizing an issue, right? And the child is verbally telling people, like at what age does a person have autonomy over their own body and get to decide? It brings up a lot of questions.
This is a tough debate. This debate is more tough than the actual stuff we talk about, the wild stuff we talk about, the head binding and the castration and all the different wild things. The actual morality and psychology of it is more threatening to people than the process itself.
Yeah, I propose, tell me what you guys think. I propose, instead of gender transition, that we now push back the territory, right? We find the frontier to get back to what was discovered previously. So what's the frontier? Not switching of your gender, but of bringing out those early reptilian genes. What if a person can be modified to the point under the influence of substances that created for us as humans the symbols that we use for medicine? What if there are genetic properties that can be brought out via these drugs? And maybe is that what they were doing? Were they just playing with the genome in order to produce something? They did claim.
It would seem to be true. The evidence would state, based on their dietary choices, the herbs they took, the medicines, the different types of processing. It all points to a form of husbandry, human husbandry.
Yeah.
And I think we also have to be honest. People are transforming themselves in all sorts of ways, and this is only going to ramp up as society continues. Okay, we have to allow people to be free to express themselves, and people are going to transform what it means to be human. It's just, I see it as like inevitable, like this whole idea of the transhuman expression of incorporation with technology, of genetic manipulation. All of it is going to happen and more, and it will be for all sorts of reasons. Like you see people nowadays who transform themselves into works of art just out of an aesthetic desire, who become reptilian. Like Ammon's talking about reptiles. There's a guy who's transformed himself into a reptile because that's how he feels in his soul. And it's like, you can judge all you want, but people are doing this and they're going to do it, and I think let them,
Just to play devil's advocate, what if I came to you? Imagine you're a parent and I come to you and I say, I can put your child through a medical process that by the age of 12, they will be 6'6". the most athletic that you've seen, and smarter than anyone in the room. As a matter of fact, we're going to take her and we're going to put her into an environment where her poetry will rule the world. She'll be able to tell the future. You won't ever have tyrants again. If I told you that, how many parents do you think would say, "My God, you mean I could give that to my daughter? I could have it so she is that incredible."
I would dare to say that parents are already doing that today in the athletic programs out there, when coach says, "Hey, I got something that can make Junior run a little faster, but it's not necessarily legal."
Well, you also talk about this though too, Ammon, where a lot of these kids would die, right? You know, this is not just a process that works, that makes you into this 6'6" superheroine. You know, many of these children do not make it, and that's a totally
here's an example. Another example. All right, you know Zac Efron, the actor. Zac Efron, okay, famous actor, doing a wrestling movie, and you might notice his body transformation, along with a certain gentleman named Conor McGregor, MMA fighter. I don't know if you ever heard of this guy, Conor McGregor. He's famous, this karate stuff. Well, he broke his leg in one of these fights in the ring, and he was out of fighting. And to heal himself, he started taking some supplements, some steroids. Now, him and Zac Efron both are displaying elements of this, that certain athletes take these things to enhance their bodies, like to rebuild your bones, especially if you break a bone, but it makes your jaw and your face bigger. And so if you'll notice, his face and his forehead has got bigger. His forehead line, and people have noticed it. They go online and they back-to-back pictures and can show you that these gentlemen, by taking these certain supplements, it's changing their bone density in their faces as well. Because they're doing it for another part of the body, for an athletic reason. Yeah. But your face, the skull in your face can still grow too. And these hormones are doing that.
Now imagine where you have witnessed this process, right? That we're totally unfamiliar with, that you've witnessed it over years, and yet you know where the sources of these drugs are, and you know where they take them from and who harvests them, and you know the processes of initiation, you know where the people go through, right? Okay, so now you're accepting in the fact that you can produce what is extraordinary or divine, right? And then you recognize that there is a divinity. The divinity is not us all sitting around reading our books saying, "Oh, great mythology," right? But divinity is something that nature can bring about, that it can, there aren't any gods without nature. Right? They just don't exist. Right? So that whole theogony is absolutely, you got to have the egg there, baby. Mommy's first. What then are they looking at as gods? I would challenge the modern community of classicists to tell us what exactly is a god, because they are calling certain people gods. And we all think, oh, it's because it's the fairy tale. No, they're not. They're watching these processes go on, and they're watching the augmentation. We all call them divinities. There is something different. Did you know the line of Medea? They're all daughters of the sun, because
but there's also all this stuff too, like when we're looking at the more human-esque divinities, they all still die, right? Even Heracles dies, and then he's transmorgified and brought to Olympus. Some of them get away with, like the daughters of Delos, they get transformed into doves, or Hyacinth gets to become Hyacinth, but there is still this connection to these cycles of change, of death and rebirth, for even these deified humans, right? Like even Medea, she has to go to the underworld. She gets to rule Elysium with Achilles, but she kind of has a death in a sense,
Yeah, and I think it's I think that whole process escapes us, that they looked at this transformation of the what you and I would call hero to god status, and it's always associated with that resurrection. You don't have it without resurrection, right? The process of sending somebody into the death phase by using a thanasimon, a death inducer, and then bringing them back to life so that they're born again. That whole process is built into their concept of what is divine, right? Jesus and God the Father and all of that, it's all coming from that same source, that same well. And it's a process of a very anthropological initiation process. And maybe, I don't know. What do you guys predict? Let's just predict the future.
Rites of transformation. You said something that's pretty. The word transformation.
Yeah.
That is banned in these religions. These, Christianity, Islam, especially Islam.
Yeah.
So much so that the way you cut your beard, the way you cut your hair, what kind of outfit you wear, the color of that outfit, meaning that you're not allowed to modify or transform in any way, because that takes you a step closer to what a creator God would do, to transform, to create something. So that's why they got to sanitize creativity out of these religions, and to control your body, what you can do with your body. That's why you got to cut those dreadlocks off. You can't have the Shiva dreadlocks, no headboarding, no taking of something that makes you think different. And what it comes down to, the key word I think is transformation.
It's also, everything that is satanic and evil is that which was beloved by these Bacchic cult. We see it time and time again. The women's sexuality, the entheogens, right? All of this transformation, right? The greatest sage of the Greek texts is Tiresias. He gets to live as a man, a woman, and as a bird, right? Like he runs the whole gamut. And transformation is at the heart of all of the Hellenist myths across the Greco-Roman period.
They asked him which was better.
Right? Yeah, he said he preferred going to war than giving birth even once. but he did say that sex as a woman was better. I remember.
Yeah, it turned no. Yeah. You can't miss that one, right? It turns out, all our scholars are sitting around saying these misogynists. Do you realize their power structure was feminine? So of course, the wisest of the humans, who's been both, says, "Oh yeah, the sex is so much better as women." They so understand what's going on, right? And we're standing around looking at each other like, really? Where's that transformation? Yeah, I agree.
I would like to point out something that I never thought of till now. All right. We're doing this episode on cranial matters, about the power of the skull. What's that on your head, buddy? Is that for a reason that you put it there? You could have put it. Why did you put it on your back of your thigh or on your foot?
Yeah, because that spot, right? That head, for example, and I love the they're actually all the same names. They're all the same names. That was Etruscan, and this is Mycenaean, and this is the Greek, and they're all the same name. But why are they doing it on the head? Because that spot is, I swear, there's a power to the head that when you're interacting with other people, your ops, your gaze is encompassing what is there. And when you get somebody under the gaze of that tattoo, it's manipulative. It's a power. It's a magician's trick, if you will. And they're always saying that God's name on your head is your guiding and divine force that brings you that power. It's a magic thing, right? Remember those magi around Jesus? It's that thing.
One
I
wild
love
thing. one wild thing, Ammon, I wanted to ask you. I remember I was looking into the head shaving rites a while ago on Topo's text, just searching key phrases, and I kept coming across. It was in Apollodorus and in some other text, I think, but it was telling of this story where they made these men who were slaves shave their heads, then write the word revolt in tattoo upon the head. And then they would go and they would remove the Phrygian cap as the sign that they were revolting. And the tattoos on the head would inspire everyone else to engage in this insurrection. And this becomes like, it's not just one text that's referencing this image. It's coming throughout all of this Roman literature to the point where they're even recreating this myth when they're letting their slaves go, where they'll shave their heads and give them a Phrygian cap. What does this relate to? Do you have any idea?
You know, when they say skuthizo in Greek, the word that we get for to be Scythian, it means to both simultaneously to shave one's head, and it means to be inebriated, not drunken, but intoxicated, to be under the influence of a mind-altering substance. So, and we know it's their tattoos that are so prominent. So, and Epimenides is picking this up, right? He transfers it to the Greek side. What I've often thought, what is that power? What is that power of shaving and then tatting up? And it, you know, it's coming right out of a culture where the women are so sexy that they have to kill 3 men before they can capture you and rape you, right? That's their culture. I mean, I don't know about you. It sounds like it might be a not too bad way to go, right? I might be into that under the right circumstances. You know what I mean? But
no, considering that you got a whip in your hand, is that a whip in your hand or is that a staff?
It's a crop, sir. It's a crop.
A riding crop at that.
You may just find yourself transformed into one of their arrow holsters. Remember that article I sent you where they found human skin turned into quivers? Like, wow.
Why not, man? There's parts of the skin that are really, you know, you can have a really nice lining. That's the only thing you need there. Plus, it's the whole proofing part of it. And they know these cultures are so bow-centered. I mean, sometimes it gets annoying. It's like, okay, how many things can you compare to a bow, right? Why is it that your medicine comes from the bow? Why is it that the snake stuff comes from the bow? How is the tension of the universe portrayed in the tension of the bow? Your music is coming from your bow. They talk about their bows as being the original singers. Oh my God, how is it? It's when you realize that bow is so integral with the poison, right? It's not regular arrows they're shooting, right? They're shooting poison, so much so that their goddess is called she who pours the bolts of poison, the poison pourer, right? That's what she's known for. They don't hunt. You don't hunt with just an arrow. That's stupid, right? You're not going to bring down lions with arrows, right? But if those arrows are tipped with toxins, yeah, then you've got a real cultural power in your hands. And those hut-dwelling Romans, they could do nothing. They could do nothing against these people. Yeah, there's a golden age of knowledge in our human history that you guys are digging up, and it's going to make people uncomfortable. But if I'd rather have the reality than the fairy tale any day of the week. And to be honest, I'm kind of excited to meet one of the first Medusa that this generation is. As soon as she comes back, hold on to your pants, Dion. I want to be there next to you, snappy, and I want you to take a picture of Dion as he makes a mess of himself. When he sees her, I want you to document this. Can you do this, Snappy?
I can document it all. But I want to ask you one last question before we kind of wind down here. Since we're talking about the head shaving, I read the Syrian Goddess by Lucian, and he talks about this mourning for Adonis, where the priestesses would shave their heads in order to mourn Adonis and to be initiated and become priestesses in the cult of the Biblian Aphrodite. And if they couldn't, then they had to go and sell themselves on the streets to the strangers. What do you think is going on with this rite? And does that relate to what you talk about with like the mourning for Jehovah?
Yeah, and it turns out women were allowed, not just allowed, but it was a woman's cult that's perpetuating this, the cult of Adonis, right? So those women who you've been married, it's a yearly festival, right? And so we're getting ready for it, and I'm a matron, right? And my husband knows that at this one time of year, if I don't shave my head, I get to go have sex with a sailor from Kos. He's coming to port, and this is the way it is. And they're giving me aphrodisiacs. It's going to be an experience that blows your mind. If you have not had sex under the influence of ancient aphrodisiacs, you don't know what sex is. Have you wondered why it is that they use the orgasm, the orgasmon, as the center knowledge container of the cult, right? It's the place that you access that grand knowledge from. You only become enlightened because you're coming to that state. You're entering into that state in the orgia, right? In the ritual, right? So they're integrating this with the medicine. And if you haven't been there on that, my goodness, right? So your wife, buddy, right now, think about what kind of society is comfortable. What kind of society says what is most important is honoring Adonis, honoring this love that Venus has for Adonis? What's more important than that? Your wife's fidelity? Excuse me? Your wife must be faithful to Venus. That's what she must be faithful to, right? And so it's her choice. If she wants to keep her hair, go out and use it and do your thing. And Mr. Husband, you got no recourse. There's no legal recourse for you. And apparently, it's common enough for their society to be tolerable of it. And by the way, if you're from another Greek island, it's a good place to go. Everybody knows. Let's go to the festival, right? I get to meet a beautiful maiden and enter into this very divine union. We celebrate this union together, and maybe some of that spark from Adonis and Aphrodite, maybe it's good for society, right? Maybe not so many of us end up shooting up places and whatnot if we had festivals of Adonis around. I don't know, mental health maybe. I don't know. As soon as that Medusa gets here, though, all bets are off, right? As soon as people see her, they're going to find out, oh, it causes brain growth, right? Oh, it causes plasticity in the brain, causes all these areas to light up together. These girls must have been geniuses. Yeah, it's how we got democracy, people. Right? We didn't get democracy from stupidity. Yeah. Oh my God. Love it.
So much wildness. Any last comments there, Dion?
Well, subscribe, share, leave a comment. Get ready next week. What next week? We have the Tarot Master.
Yeah, we're going to talk to Ryan Seven. He's going to be doing us a whole presentation on the tarot. That should be lots of fun. But also make sure you go and you like and subscribe to Lady Babylon. Ammon's back with a couple new series. He's interviewing Lucifer, Satan, the devil. And, he's back digging into the text. 2 thumbs up. Yeah, we loved your bringing revelation there. That was fun.
That's awfully nice. That means a lot. It's something to be given that access. I've got exclusive Satan. Who wouldn't want that? It's gorgeous. And I just want to thank you guys for doing what you do and continuing to propagate the museum. I'm in a transition where I'm trying to create an institution, and I need to bring people in. And there's a lot of people out there that work with Lady Babylon that are part of this body of, the new Renaissance. And somehow we're going to coordinate this. Can't see it yet, but somehow it's going to get coordinated. And the stuff that you're doing, these contributions, all of these will have to go into archives. They'll have to be accessible. You know what I mean? We can't do it with money, right? I don't take contributions. I don't take any payments. I can be monetized if I want to. If I did, it would bring me high. It would get me closer to catching the algorithmic wave. But I don't want that. I don't want that. And there's other organizations right now that are doing the same thing. They're a philanthropic, humanitarian, charitable organizations. So if the museum comes back, first we need the Medusa. As soon as we get her back, we can get the museum. And I'm telling you, they could take those people and they could turn them into something that you and I could stand back and appreciate. And guess what? They were healthier.
Well, Dion and I are certainly along for the ride. We're down to co-create and to try and bring that back. Love to have that monstrous feminine. Just been reading Ligeia on the channel, and that was blowing my mind absolutely. And that return, that monstrous return, and you don't know what that means at the end of the story. And now I'm waiting. Okay, so what's going to happen next?
that Ligeia, by the way, is the epithet in Greek for the muse, and it's
really,
yes, it specifically means. Poe knew this, right? It wasn't the bust of Athena for any reason. That Ligeia is an epithet you use for the muse, and it is the concept of a voice that is piercing. They usually translate it as shrill.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah.
When I was looking into it on Theoi, they said that she was one of the sirens, and sometimes is listed as one of the primordial nymphs. So I had talked about her in relation to the hymn to the Mother of Gods, and then I talked about her with Odysseus and the slaying of the sirens, and also tried to connect it with Ligeia. There's that monstrous mother kind of imagery that you get throughout the thing, and I just kept thinking of Medea's mother, who's a nymphi and is also related to this light and dark image. She has that duality there, So there's so much going on with Poe. It's wild how much he keeps bringing up in terms of just the Greek imagery, and in that one text alone, it's everywhere.
I think you could classify him as a dragon. I think once you've saturated yourself with so much radiation from this ancient mystery, like Byron, I think you have to consider the person a dragon, because they're perpetuating that relic, which was originally the song of that one Medusa, that one Medwa. There's something about the voice. I want to bring that new voice to the world. If we do that, supposedly we can restart the cleansing, the purification. We might be able to keep Lady Liberty. People are not taking it serious what this year is. We're coming to a head, and we're going to drag everybody else in with us. So, hey, I love it. Let's go. Let's get her back. Snappy will bring her back. Snappy, please.
Yeah, we need that. We need Ammon. We need the ingredients. We need that theriac, that elixir of even Ligeia. Poe, in some kind of drunken haze, manages to recreate a death chamber ritual, but there's still this magic red elixir that gets poured into her wine that causes the resurrection.
Yeah. That's the key. Isn't it funny? The key is in the biology. It's in you want to open that gate and bring her back, right? You want to bring back that tower. You've got to access it through that magic of the elixir. I love it. I love it. It's the Haima of life, man. Comes right from the flesh. And all the Christians are like, what? Yeah, it's coming. It's coming. Oh God, I love it. Thank you for having me today.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Ammon. This was so much fun. All right, everyone. Peace, love. Hail Satan. We'll talk again soon. Take care.
Hail Satan.